welcome to this week's episode of Empower Hour. I am your host and the founder and CEO of Empower Employ. If you've never heard about Empower Employ, well, you're really missing out. We are providing sourcing and corporate education and technology solutions to companies and helping veterans and military spouses find meaningful employment through our training and education programs. Usually on Empower Hour, and much like we are today, we're going to be discussing the employment landscape of the military community and bringing up to our stage on a live platform, obviously, the changemakers in the space who are making a huge impact. So I'm really excited, speaking of changemakers, to bring my first guest today. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Bringing on it live today, it'll be Karin Childress-Wiley. Karin is the executive director of the Randstad Veteran Center of Excellence. She has over 25 years of staffing and talent and acquisition experience, with most of that focus being on supporting veteran and diverse candidates during transition, during their skill development or their economic challenges. So I won't give you the rest of Karin's story. I want her to share it. So welcome to the stage, my guest for this week, Karin Childress-Wiley.
Hey, how are you? Good to be here with you today.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So grateful to have you, but let's get straight to it because, looks like we're all, traveling and running around. So Karin, for people that have not met you, can you tell us about your current role at Randstad and give us a little bit of your story?
Sure. So I am Karin Childress-Wiley, and I currently am, and in typical military spouse fashion, sort of undersold myself on my bio that I sent to you. I'm currently the vice president of the Veteran Center of Excellence. I know. For Randstad. And the Veteran Center of Excellence is a COE that's meant to be at the center of supply and demand for military affiliated talent for Randstad. Randstad, if you haven't heard of them, is the largest staffing company in the world. And the idea is that by being at the center of supply and demand, we can help connect with this robust military affiliated talent and partners and programs, and then help supply that talent into our clients. And we do business with thousands of clients, the very employers that this military affiliated community is looking to connect with. And I'm a military spouse, which is, a big part of what we'll be talking about here today.
Yeah. And I've watched you grow some really amazing programs, and I'm really honored. I feel like I'm having a fangirl moment. But since you mentioned that you were a military spouse, could you tell us how you found your footing and working and building these amazing global programs?
Yeah. So it really developed naturally. I can tell you that I didn't seek out a career in the veteran space. Sort of I've always been attached to the military community. I not only am a military spouse, but I'm also the daughter of, the granddaughter of, my best friend's father was in the Air Force. So this has just always been part of my personal community. So I definitely had an affinity for our military community. But my connection and first foray into building programs in this space really started more on the diversity side as opposed to the veteran specific side. So I had the honor of being part of Monster.com way back. I always say to people, put yourself in the way back machine. Think back to when even the idea of job postings not being in the newspaper, but being online, that's when I worked at Monster, or when I first started working at Monster, the idea of digitizing that recruitment space. And I had the privilege of working in the recruitment advertising side of Monster for many years. And we were beginning to reach diverse audiences and niche audiences. And I got to lead our diversity programs, which then with the acquisition of military.com turned into veteran programs, and just sort of one foot after another became leading the veteran employment programs for military.com and Monster. And really my relationship with my spouse sort of was happening at the same time. I had met him just a few months before I started working at Monster. So he was just my brand new boyfriend when I started working at Monster. And then progressed to my husband and then the father of my children, all through those years, eventually to his retirement.
Love it. And who helped you get to where you are? Is there a specific mentor or somebody that just comes to mind immediately that you're really grateful that you met? And what did they teach you?
Yeah, that is probably the hardest question to answer here, right?
I get so sad. I'm like, I want to give everybody credit, but it takes forever. And then I don't ever want to get a text message. It's like, you forgot me. And I'll be like, no, I just blurted out what came out. So the disclaimer on this question is if Karin does not name drop you, it's not that she doesn't love you. Just put her on the spot. So tell us all about kind of your mentors and your connections.
Yeah. But in spirit of making that pivot into the veteran space, right, there really is somebody who was super important in that pivot. And he was my boss at the time. So I had to make a PCS, or we had to make a PCS from Southern California to Kentucky. And it was challenging. Of course, my employer, Monster, military.com, they wanted to support me, but it was a difficult transition given that we were a regionalized organization. And at the time, my boss, Mark Charnock, recognized in me the ability to take on this diversity and recruitment advertising space and moved me into a national position and really helped me understand the diversity and recruitment, the diversity advertising space. And so he was super important to me. And not only that, but he was my boss during a deployment, my first child. And so in so many of these moments where my career could have taken a back seat, he did not allow that. He kept pushing me forward in my career, despite the other things that can happen to military spouses, right, when they become a single mom for the first time, because there's significant other was deployed. So, my story is that my husband deployed 10 days after my first child was born. And he really made it possible for me to get through that moment. And so Mark Charnock is my answer. And I hope he gets to hear this because even all these years later, he was super important in that pivot for me.
Well, we'll activate the FBI, the Female Bureau of Investigation into Spouses, and ask them to hunt him down and send him this notification. And
or LinkedIn could probably just do that.
LinkedIn, yeah. In all good things. And then it's really interesting that you bring up, a spouse or a boss who backed you during your child. So for me, I was on active duty when I had our first child, and I was married to an active duty service member. Who was not present. Our first deployment was a 19-month deployment. He missed our entire pregnancy, and I delivered by myself, and then had my son on my own for 9 months. And I have no idea what that would have looked like in the corporate landscape. I imagine, I got lucky enough that I was serving a country, so I had a guaranteed job. I had a different set of challenges, but that's kind of where I secretly want to be like, thank God for remote work these days because the landscape has changed. But what a good story to hear about how someone supported you. I really hope that people are kind of taking notes and listening to these challenges and working towards, those solutions. And we teach some of those programs here at the company. So enough about me and my woe is me story that I single parented and delivered by myself. One of 3, pretty normal, right? What are you currently working on right now? What is hot for jobs? I know at one point there were some amazing apprenticeship programs. What's going on in your world that you want to have people really interact with you with? What do you want the audience to know?
Yeah. So I think probably the main focus for our programs right now is to expand beyond thinking about veteran hiring in just that moment of transition. And I know that those of us in the veteran hiring community have been there for a long time, but I think employers are really starting to get there. And at Randstad, our focus is on expanding that, not just left of transition or not just thinking about veterans, but really thinking about these moments of education, right? Not just the 200,000 people that are exiting, but those that are that exit and go into a 4-year degree program, go into a VOTEC school, go into a certification program, and really trying to harness all of these transition moments, transitioning out of school, transitioning out of the certification programs. So the big energy in Randstad right now is thinking about how can we build teams with veterans that have just completed a moment of education, like a degree, a certification, or how can we bring veterans in and then put them through some of this upskilling or certification. So, upskilling, reskilling, retooling, redeploying, these are important words. How can we make sure that veterans are brought into this, not just as they exit the military, but, across the board? That's our big
And
concern.
I think that is amazing because like people like me, I've been transitioned out for a while. Like I'm officially veteran, full on old and crusty status, my assessment of myself, not everybody else. And so I'm in a different place in my life than where I would have been 5 years ago. And if I had decided 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago that I no longer wanted to be in tech, maybe I wanted to be, a data analyst or work in Salesforce or do Tableau or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
I love to hear that Randstad is really focused on that. Or then you have kind of on the flip side, the spouse population who maybe I went to school for a bachelor's in communications and then found out that I really don't like to write or communicate. I'd much rather do something else. I think there's not a lot of kind of those senior, not even senior, there's not a lot of those opportunities that are talked about where you can pivot, where you are given training, where you are paid. It's always been kind of that traditional route of use this scholarship to spend, $100,000 on a new degree that gets you nowhere. And then you're creating debt and adding to the social, economic impacts, the negative impacts of what's happening. So it's very cool. I did see on the website that's playing on the bottom here, it's Randstad.USA, diversity inclusion / veterans centers of excellence. Yes, I did that really quickly. The coolest thing that I saw is having a career doesn't mean sacrifice. And I want everyone to really let that sink in. If you are a spouse, you can have a career.
100%.
If you're a veteran, you can have a career. There are portable remote roles that are more than just, and there's nothing wrong with this, but more than call center, more than data entry, more than like just project managers alone, ops managers. I mean, it's just unlimited what you can have. And I believe that Randstad is a good place for you to start to partner. Karin clearly knows what she's doing. So sticking my stamp on that. Let me get off my yes, good job horn and move on to the next wonderful question that we have for you. So now that we've talked about, pivoting those careers, what's your favorite NPO or your favorite organizations for transitioning service members and military spouses?
Yeah, well, another one where I almost felt as bad not naming every one of my favorite companies that we work with or nonprofits that we work with here. So every nonprofit out there, forgive me. But to kind of stay in the vein of what I just said, where we're focusing our energy right now on upskilling and reskilling and certifications, two of my favorites that we're working with. Number one, Student Veterans of America. If you exit the military and you're going back to school, make sure that you stay connected to your community through an on-campus Student Veterans of America chapter. And then SVA, they're working with groups like Randstad to connect you with internships and different ways to enter back into that workforce. Because let's face it, if you get out of the military or you're a military spouse, right, and you go into a 4-year degree program, you're probably not going back to an on-base career fair to try to get back into the workforce. And so you're sort of missing a lot of the programs that are offered to you at transition if you're not connecting in with like a Student Veterans of America or something like that to sort of reconnect to your community. So something like that, super important. And then another, if it's not a 4-year degree program, if it's more of the credentialing or the certifications, I love the work that Onward to Opportunity is doing because they can, connect you when you're still in service through, like a skill bridge learning or training opportunity, all the way through post-service. When you have the chance to go back, reskill, they're connected to all sorts of amazing partners like Amazon and Red River. But of course, Randstad is particularly fond of the relationship they have with Cisco and the work that we do there through Cisco Cyber Vets and the Cisco Networking Academy. But just so much good available through Onward to Opportunity.
I wrote all of that down, and I'll tell everyone. I actually have used Onward to Opportunity, so I'm very familiar with that. I went there for my PMP
Yeah, so did my
certification.
husband. Yeah.
Great opportunity there. It was just one of the things. And they have a great, because I'm a tech person, great CompTIA program there for A+ and Tech+. And we can talk about certifications and upskilling later, but those are 2 certifications that you can get and almost be guaranteed to work a DoD contract. And Karen's completely right. Once I transitioned, I left that installation and I never went back. I avoid going to the installations at all costs if I don't have to, but I love all of you. I'll come for like food. I just don't hang out there. I like to be out in the civilian population, enjoying the culture. Okay. So we have 2 more super hard questions for you.
No.
And then we'll
okay.
out
I'm ready.
And
by the way, I haven't cried yet. See, I told you I wasn't going to.
You're doing good.
I almost did when I said Mark's name, but I didn't.
Shout out to Matt Quick. I am so sorry, man, for last week. I did not mean to do that. I didn't know that was going to happen. But I appreciate how raw and how human Matt is and was able to do that with me. So for you, we've got all these amazing programs. You've got this amazing website with all these cool skills. We've talked about these amazing resources. You're a walking library. How do you prefer that people get in contact with you and your teams, or with Randstad in general?
Well, with me, I think that LinkedIn might just be the easiest. Here's a little secret. Am I the only one that has my actual contact information in the contact section of LinkedIn? I don't know. Check it out. You might find my email address and my telephone number there if you try. Yeah. It always amazes me, but it's right there. Not to mention that you can send me messages through LinkedIn. So LinkedIn would be a great place. But of course, you can just use my Randstad email address as well, which is Karin.Childress@randstadusa.com. And if you send a message through the Veterans Center of Excellence on Randstad, that will eventually make its way to me as well.
Got it. Well, awesome. And the very hardest question that we talk about every week, also my favorite question, because you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. What was your favorite duty station and why?
Oh, well, this one is a really easy answer, but it's kind of a sad answer. Okay. But I'm not going to cry. Okay. I told you that my husband deployed when, I had this little baby, and we had been living off base. So in fact, the only time we ever lived on base was when he deployed and I had this little brand new baby. It made him feel more comfortable to think about us living on base, which I get. And so I gave in, and we went and lived on Point Magoo. Do you know where that's at?
No.
It's on the coast between Malibu and Ventura.
Oh, life must have been so hard for you.
No, but it made him feel better. It made him feel better that we lived there. And we had this time. Actually, I think Floss lived there. I think Flossie Hall and I have talked about it. She lived there. I think we lived on the same street. These teeny little beach bungalows that were ant infested, but you could walk out onto the beach. And I had this little baby, and every day we would sit in our car and look at the ocean, and my husband wasn't there, and it was kind of magic. It's kind of a magic way to be alone and raise this baby.
And Marine military spouse or Navy military spouse?
Marine, yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay, so clearly I made, please don't bash me, Army, but after hearing that the Marines and Navy get houses where they can walk out to the beach, I'm rethinking my choice after all these years, because
there's so much more that I could tell you. It was a nature preserve. It was I don't know, everybody out there who knows exactly what it is going to write into you and tell you the ways in which I'm wrong. But I think it was a tern, which is like a special seagull preserve.
Okay. Seagulls.
And it was like an estuary, like when the tides come in and out. Before I said Point Magoo, I sort of researched all of this, but it was like this really lovely place, and the sea lions would come in and out.
Yeah, I'm rethinking my choice, if you will, of of what I chose. The highlight of my favorite duty station, I always say this, was Fort Irwin, and all I got to look at, and I'm not mad, was wonderful mountains, beautiful sunsets, no beach. I had a sand lake that you could go look at, and no seagulls, only donkeys and rattlesnakes and a bunch of other, I was going to make a really loud joke, but I won't, a bunch of other animals that are like donkeys that are running around out there. But other than that, nothing significant to report. Okay. Yeah. Well, Karin,
it was beautiful.
I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Empower Hour. That wraps it up for all of us. If you want to, if you haven't reached out to Karin already, please do so. Would love to hear about it. So everyone, just as a closing, again, thank you for joining us here on LinkedIn. Please join us next Wednesday, where I will have here on Empower Hour with our guest, Tyrone Hewitt, as we discuss the great transition, as I've named it, and the amazing programs that can help prep veterans to transition to civilian life.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right. Bye. Thank you.